Hi everyone, my name's Chris and today I'm going to be reviewing the Tokina 11 to 16mm f2.8 lens, as you can see me unboxing right now. This is a really popular ultra wide angle lens for filmmakers as it has a fast f2.8 aperture throughout its tiny zoom range. A lot of stills photographers like this lens too because it has a reputation for being pretty sharp. It comes with a lens hood and caps, as you can see here. And what I want to show you is that this lens is really nicely made. It's pretty heavy and it feels like a lot of it is made of metal. It feels really sturdy. As you can see here, the zoom ring is really nice and smooth. This lens is designed for crop sensor cameras, which means it'll work on most digital SLR cameras with APS-C sensors like the Canon 60D, 70D, 700D, the Rebel series. But at the end of the review, we'll take a look at how well it can work on one of Canon's expensive full-frame cameras. Here you can see the focus ring. You have to click it into autofocus or manual mode. It's a bit clunky and it takes getting used to, but it works real smooth. The autofocus is a little noisy, but it's quick and fairly accurate. So why bother getting an ultra-wide angle lens? Well, here's some footage of a chapel with my Canon kit lens. It's set at 18mm, which is as wide as you can go with a kit lens. As you can see, it's hard to get the whole room in a picture. The aperture is set to f3.5 and the ISO is 4000, so the camera is struggling to get a clean picture. And here's the same scene with a Tokina lens at 11mm. As you can see, you can get way more image into the frame. And the Tokina lens goes down to f2.8, so I only needed an ISO of 2500, so the camera can produce a better image. This lens is fantastic to use in any indoor space, from bedrooms to cathedrals. Let's look at image quality. I've taken all these test shots on my Canon 60D with its 18MP sensor. At its widest angle of 11mm and with the aperture wide open at f2.8, we can see that the center of the image is very nice and sharp. It stays nice and sharp until we reach the extreme corners of the image, so for an ultra-wide angle f2.8 lens, this is fairly good. What's not so good is the strong chromatic aberration. You can see plenty of green and purple fringing on contrasting edges, especially on the edges of window panes. This chromatic aberration is really quite strong. When we stop the lens down to f4, we see excellent sharpness, and the aberrations are better, but still quite noticeable. They're particularly strong on the horizontal plane. If we look down to the middle edge of the image, you can see it very strongly in the windows. Even stopping down to f8 doesn't help. But apart from that, the picture quality remains very sharp, and at least chromatic aberration can be sorted out in editing. So overall, it's a good performance. Let's zoom in to 16mm. The picture quality, well, it's pretty much exactly the same. Sharp in the middle at f2.8, with softer corners which have plenty of chromatic aberration. You can even see it between the bricks in this picture. That's pretty bad. Stopping down to f4 again brings a big improvement, but the colourful aberrations remain. Everything is razor sharp at f5.6. So overall, we have a very sharp camera lens here, particularly when the aperture is topped down just a little to f4. But the chromatic aberration really is a little out of control. Tokina lenses are notorious for this. The lens gives an okay performance in terms of distortion. At 11mm you can see some barrel distortion here, but it's not tremendously bad. Zoom into 16mm and it goes away. You can also see here that the Tokina lens doesn't have any big problems with vignetting, which is a nice bonus. So overall, the image quality is good, and the only major issue I had was with the quality of the bokeh, or background blur. This isn't really a big deal for an ultra-wide angle lens, as their business is not really to give you blurry backgrounds. But when you do get a narrow depth of field, the bokeh is very harsh and distracting on this lens, which is a disappointment. The Canon 10 to 22mm lens does a lot better in this regard. Now, the Tokina 11 to 16mm is an APS-C lens, but it will fit onto a full-frame camera. Here, I've put it on a Canon 6D. As you can see, the image circle at 11mm is nowhere near big enough. But if we zoom into 16mm, we get a very usable image with no major vignetting. That's pretty cool. It means that if you upgrade to a full-frame camera, you'll have an ultra-wide angle lens ready to go. For fun, I decided to also test this lens on my Canon 6D, so let's take a look at the image quality on a full-frame camera. Remember, these test results only apply for Canon's expensive full-frame cameras, which are the 1D, 5D and 6D series. Here's the image at 16mm and f2.8. The centre of the image is reasonably sharp, but things get pretty ugly in the corners to say the least. That's an extremely soft image. f4 is a little better, and so is f5.6, and at f8 and f11 we get acceptable sharpness in the corners. The chromatic aberration is sadly still there, but it's a tiny bit less pronounced, as you'd expect on a full-frame camera. The middle of the image is excellently sharp, so you can just about get away with using this lens on a full-frame camera if you don't mind softer corners. Also, on full frame, you can expect to still see some barrel distortion at 16mm. Anyway, I like this lens a lot, and I've managed to get some great pictures with it, certainly on my Canon 60D. The fast f2.8 aperture is really useful. My copy originally had a terrible back focus issue when I autofocused, so it had to go back to Tokina for repair. They had the lens for absolutely ages before sending it back, so if you buy this lens, make sure you get a warranty. But on the whole, it's a great little ultra-wide lens, especially if you're filmmaking.